Karen pulled out a gun in the middle of our Christmas dinner and aimed it at my deaf child. The room was full of laughter, candles were glowing, and the smell of turkey filled the air. No, one imagined that Christmas night would turn into a nightmare. My son couldn't hear the shouting. He couldn't understand the fear in the room. He just looked at me, confused, wondering why this woman hated him so much. Karen said, "Kids like him don't belong in normal families." Then the gun went off. Plates shattered. People screamed. The Christmas tree crashed to the floor. I thought I had lost my child forever. But what happened next made everyone freeze. The police, the family, even Karen herself. Because that bullet didn't end the story, it exposed a truth no one was ready for. Before we begin, I want you to pause for just 1 second. If you're watching this video from any city in the United States, New York, Chicago, Houston, Los Angeles, Miami, backhand index pointing down, comment the name of your city below. Let me know where you're watching from, because stories like this happen closer to home than we realize. Now, if you're new here, this channel tells real-life inspired stories that are emotional, intense, and expose the kind of truths people try to hide. So, before the story starts, backhand index pointing right, make sure you subscribe, because once you hear this, you won't forget it. What you're about to hear isn't just another dramatic Christmas story. It's about hatred disguised as concern. It's about how society treats children who are different. And it's about a moment when one woman's cruelty went too far. That Christmas night began like any other, a family gathered around a table, smiling for photos, pretending everything was perfect. But behind those smiles were years of judgment, silence, and resentment. My son couldn't hear their whispers. He couldn't hear the insults. But he felt them. And when a gun was pulled out in that dining room, it wasn't just a trigger that was pulled. A lifetime of truth came crashing out. Stay with me until the end, because what happened after the shot was fired shocked the police, changed our family forever, and proved that sometimes the quietest voice in the room carries the loudest truth. Now, let me take you back to that Christmas night. Christmas had always been complicated in our family. On the outside, everything looked perfect. Matching sweaters, warm lights wrapped around the railing, holiday music playing softly in the background. Anyone walking past our house that night would have thought we were one of those picture-perfect families you see on greeting cards. But perfection was an illusion. The truth was sitting right across the dinner table from me. Karen. She arrived late, as usual, heels clicking loudly against the floor like she wanted attention before she even spoke. Her smile was sharp, controlled, never reaching her eyes. She hugged everyone except my son, Ethan. Ethan didn't notice. He never did. He was born deaf, and over the years, that silence had protected him from more cruelty than I could ever explain. He lived in a world of expressions, touch, and light. He read lips imperfectly, relied on sign language, and trusted people far more than they deserved. That trust was what scared me the most. As Karen took her seat, her eyes flicked toward Ethan for just a moment, long enough for me to catch it. There was something there. Not fear. Not discomfort. Disgust. I tightened my grip around my fork. "Let's have a nice dinner," my husband said, trying too hard. "It's Christmas." Karen laughed lightly. "Of course. I'm all about family." Ethan smiled and waved at her. A small, innocent wave. She didn't wave back. Dinner began quietly. Plates were passed around. Someone poured wine. Small talk filled the air, weather, work, holiday plans. The kind of meaningless conversation people use to avoid what they really feel. Ethan tapped my arm and signed. "Why is everyone so tense?" I forced a smile and signed back, "Just tired. Eat your potatoes." He nodded and went back to his plate, completely unaware that he was the reason tension lived in that room. Karen watched him eat. "You know," she said, suddenly her voice slicing through the noise, "I read something interesting the other day." No one responded. We all knew better than to encourage her. She continued anyway. "They say kids with conditions like his," she gestured vaguely toward Ethan without looking at him, "require a lot of sacrifices, emotionally, financially, socially." The room went still. My husband cleared his throat. "Karen, not tonight." "I'm just saying," she replied, shrugging. "People should be honest about what they sign up for." Ethan looked up confused. He could see lips moving, but he couldn't follow the words fast enough. He glanced at me, eyebrows raised. I signed quickly, nothing important. Karen noticed. "Oh," she said, tilting her head. "Does he even understand what's happening?" That was it. I pushed my chair back slightly. "He understands more than you think." She smiled. "I doubt that." My heart started pounding. I could feel that familiar instinct rising, the one that told me something was about to go wrong. Karen wasn't just being rude. She was building toward something. I had seen it before. When Ethan was younger, Karen once told me it was selfish to bring a deaf child into family gatherings because it made others uncomfortable. Another time, she suggested special schools, special homes, places where he wouldn't be a burden. I had shut her down every time. But tonight, there was something different in her tone. Something darker. Ethan reached for his glass, smiling as he lifted it like everyone else, trying to participate in the moment. He signed, "Merry Christmas." A few people smiled back. Karen didn't. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "You know," she said, "the world doesn't adjust for weakness. At some point, reality has to be faced." I stood up. "Enough." She looked up at me slowly. "Or what?" The question hung in the air longer than it should have. That's when I noticed her purse. It was on the floor beside her chair, unzipped, and her hand was inside it. My stomach dropped. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could say a word, Karen stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Karen, sit down," someone said. She didn't. Instead, she pulled her hand out of the purse. And with it, a gun. Everything after that happened too fast and too slow at the same time. Someone screamed. Another person knocked over a glass. Ethan froze, eyes wide, staring at the object in her hand without understanding what it was, or why everyone suddenly looked terrified. Karen's hand shook, but her eyes were steady. "I'm tired of pretending," she said. "Tired of this fake sympathy. Kids like him don't belong in normal families." "No," I shouted, stepping forward. She turned toward Ethan. The gun followed. Ethan looked at me, scared now, searching my face for answers I didn't have time to give. I reached for him. Then, the gun fired. The sound was deafening to everyone except the one person it mattered to most. Ethan never heard it. He fell backward out of his chair. The room exploded into chaos. Screaming, crying, people diving for cover. Plates shattered against the floor. The Christmas tree lights flickered as it toppled over. I dropped to my knees beside Ethan. Ethan. I screamed, my hands shaking as I touched his chest, his arms, his face, looking for blood, for movement, for anything. Karen stood frozen, the gun slipping from her fingers. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. He moved. But Ethan didn't move. For one terrifying second, I thought my world had ended. Then, his fingers tightened around my sleeve. Slowly, his eyes opened, and he looked straight at me, alive. But what no one realized yet, what Karen couldn't have known, was that Ethan had seen everything, and what he was about to reveal would change everything. The sound of sirens pierced the cold December night before anyone had a chance to process what had just happened. Karen's hands were trembling. The gun lay on the floor, its black metal glinting under the flickering Christmas lights. Her carefully crafted mask of composure had completely cracked. People were huddled around my son, Ethan, who lay on the floor, his small body pressed to mine. His wide, innocent eyes were locked on mine, and in that moment I realized he understood everything, even if he couldn't hear a single word. The front door burst open, and two uniformed officers rushed in, flashlights cutting through the shadows. "Everybody stay where you are," one shouted, his voice booming. Karen froze. Her eyes darted between the officers, then to Ethan. I tried to explain in a trembling voice, it was an accident. She. But before I could finish, Karen cut me off, her voice rising. He moved. I didn't mean. The officers' eyes widened as they assessed the room. Broken plates, toppled chairs, shattered glasses, the Christmas tree leaning dangerously, and a terrified child on the floor. "Step back," one officer barked, moving toward Karen. She raised her hands, backing away as if she had rehearsed this exact moment, but the truth in her eyes betrayed her. One of the officers knelt beside Ethan, carefully checking him over. His fingers brushed Ethan's arms, chest, head. "He's alive," the officer said, relief flooding his voice. I exhaled shakily, trying to stop my hands from shaking. My son, my little boy, my miracle, he was alive. But the fear wasn't gone. Karen was still standing, a mixture of panic and arrogance on her face. "I didn't mean to," she repeated, her words desperate. I just... One officer's gaze shifted toward me. "Ma'am, did she fire at your child?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, she shot at him." Karen's lips quivered. He provoked me. He. No." I shouted. "Ethan didn't do anything." The tension in the room was suffocating. Neighbors had begun to gather outside, peeking through the windows. I could see their horrified expressions in the dim glow of porch lights. Then it happened. Ethan, still lying on the floor, lifted his small hand and signed. Slowly, deliberately. The officers froze. Everyone froze. I leaned closer, my heart pounding. I had to translate for them. Ethan's fingers moved carefully. "She's lying. She did this on purpose." A chill ran down my spine. The words were silent, but the weight of them hit the room like a hammer. Karen's face turned white. Her eyes darted around frantically. She realized that Ethan, my little deaf son, had just exposed her. One officer knelt closer, noticing Ethan's hand movements. "He's signing?" he asked, astonished. I nodded. "Yes, he understands everything. He's telling the truth." The officer's gaze hardened as he looked at Karen. "Step over here, ma'am. Now." Karen hesitated, her usual arrogance slipping away. She slowly moved toward them, hands raised, but the look in her eyes wasn't just fear, it was shock. She hadn't anticipated that the child she tried to harm would have the power to reveal her guilt without uttering a single sound. Neighbors outside were recording on their phones. The whole scene was unfolding like a nightmare that no one could look away from. I knelt beside Ethan, holding his trembling hands. "It's okay," I whispered. "You're safe now. You're safe." He looked at me, and for the first time that night I saw a small, cautious smile. Despite everything, his spirit hadn't broken. The officers cuffed Karen and began leading her out of the room. She screamed that it was all a misunderstanding, that she hadn't meant to harm Ethan. But no one was listening. The truth was written all over her face, and Ethan's silent testimony had made it undeniable. As they passed by, she locked eyes with me, fury and disbelief mixed with something else. Regret, perhaps, but I couldn't be sure. All I could think about was the weight of what had just happened. Ethan remained on the floor, holding my hand tightly. I could feel his small body shaking. I kissed the top of his head, whispering promises that I would protect him forever. Then one of the officers, his voice softer now, asked, "Do you want to give a statement, ma'am?" I nodded. "Yes, but there's something you need to know." Ethan's small hand lifted again, signing slowly, deliberately. "She has done this before." I froze. My blood ran cold. The officer's eyes widened. "Before? You mean this isn't her first time?" I shook my head. "No, she's always hated him. Always. And now she's crossed the line." Karen's crime had been exposed, but the implications of Ethan's silent revelation sent a ripple through the room. The officers were no longer just responding to a single incident. They were investigating a pattern of dangerous behavior. I looked down at my son. He was exhausted, but he had done something extraordinary. In his silence, he had revealed a truth that no one else could. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Silence can be louder than words. Courage can come in the smallest hands. And a child who can't hear can still make the whole world listen. The room began to settle. Neighbors continued to watch, whispering among themselves. But Ethan's gaze remained steady. He had survived the impossible, and in doing so had exposed the dark reality hiding in plain sight. I held him close, my tears flowing freely. That night, nothing would ever feel the same again. Because the Christmas that started with fear and violence had become a testament to resilience, to truth, and to the unbreakable spirit of a child who refused to be silenced. The following morning felt surreal. The house was quiet now, the chaos of Christmas night replaced by a heavy, tense silence. Police tape blocked the front door. Neighbors whispered from behind closed blinds. And somewhere deep inside me, a new kind of fear had taken root, not for my son's life anymore, but for the storm that had just begun. Karen had been taken into custody, but even handcuffed and escorted by officers, her presence lingered like a shadow in the house. It wasn't just that she had pulled a gun on Ethan. It was the cold, deliberate hatred in her eyes, the way she had planned every step with cruel precision. The detectives arrived at our home mid-morning, notebooks in hand, eyes sharp. "Tell us exactly what happened," one officer said. His tone was professional but not without sympathy. I recounted everything from Karen's early comments about Ethan to the moment she drew the gun. And then, I paused. I looked down at Ethan, who sat silently on the couch beside me. He was small but alert, his bright eyes observing every movement, every gesture. He had already proven he could communicate the truth, and now, perhaps, he could help in a way that words alone couldn't. I signed to him carefully, "Can you show them what happened?" His tiny fingers moved gracefully, deliberately, signing the entire sequence of events, Karen's threats, her positioning the moment she pulled out the gun, and, finally, the way she had aimed it at him. The detectives leaned in, watching closely. They had never seen anything like it. One of them whispered, "She's testifying without speaking." Incredible. Ethan continued, finishing the last part, pointing toward where Karen had been standing. "Exactly," I said aloud. "That's where she stood. That's what she did." The officers exchanged glances. This changes everything," one of them muttered. Soon after, the interrogation of Karen began at the station. She maintained her story. It was an accident. He moved. I didn't mean it. But the more they questioned her, the more her lies began to crumble. The detectives cross-referenced Karen's statements with witness accounts, security camera footage from the neighborhood, and Ethan's silent testimony. Every time she contradicted herself, her face betrayed panic. The arrogance and confidence she wore like armor the night before had vanished entirely. One officer explained the gravity of the situation to us later. "Your son's testimony, even silent, is admissible. His signing is a record of events as they happened. It's incredibly rare, but it's strong evidence." I looked at Ethan, tears welling in my eyes. He didn't smile or celebrate, he simply nodded. He understood the weight of what he had just done. Meanwhile, Karen's behavior became increasingly erratic. Friends and acquaintances were contacted by police. Statements revealed a pattern. Karen had previously shown hostility toward Ethan, making remarks about how children like him were burdens, even trying to limit our family gatherings. Each revelation was like peeling back a layer of darkness. Karen had carefully maintained a public image of being polite, caring, and family-oriented. But the truth, Ethan's truth, showed a very different person, calculated, cruel, and unrepentant. Detectives returned to our home several times, asking Ethan to reenact parts of the incident. Each time, he did so with precision, showing gestures, pointing, and signing. Every movement exposed Karen's intent, making it impossible for her to claim innocence. As the investigation unfolded, I realized the power of a child's silent courage. Ethan, who couldn't speak, had become the ultimate witness. His small hands, his focused gaze, his unwavering spirit, these were now tools of justice. At the same time, the media began to pick up fragments of the story. Headlines hinted at the shocking Christmas shooting. Some tried to sensationalize it, others focused on Ethan's survival. But for us, it wasn't about attention, it was about truth. And Ethan's truth could not be denied. Karen's bail hearing came a few days later. In the courtroom, she tried again to fabricate her version of events. But Ethan was there, his mother translating his signed account into words for the court. Every movement he made, every detail he showed with his hands, painted a picture that contradicted Karen's lies completely. The judge listened intently, watching Ethan closely. There was a pause as the silent testimony sank in. Then the court acknowledged the evidence. This is compelling. The child has testified in a manner that demonstrates intent and fact. Bail will be denied. I felt a wave of relief, but it was tempered by the enormity of what had happened. The danger had passed for now, but the road ahead, legal battles, family fallout, and emotional healing would be long. That night at home, I sat with Ethan in the quiet living room. The broken plates and toppled tree from Christmas night still littered the floor, silent reminders of what had happened. I knelt beside him, holding his hands gently. "You were amazing today," I signed to him. He looked at me, small lips quivering, and signed back. "I just wanted to be safe." His words, though silent, spoke louder than anything Karen had said. They were filled with courage, clarity, and truth. In that moment, I realized something profound. Ethan's silence wasn't weakness. It was strength. It was power. And it had saved us all. But even as relief settled over our home, I knew this was only the beginning. Karen's hatred had been exposed, yes, but it would take more than exposure to repair the wounds she had inflicted, to ensure justice, and to protect Ethan from ever facing danger like that again. And somewhere deep down, I knew that the next twist, the next revelation, would be even more shocking than anyone could imagine. Because while Karen's lies were crumbling, something hidden in her past and her motives had yet to surface. And when it did, it would change everything. The days following Karen's arrest were tense. Police officers continued to visit, taking statements, collecting evidence, and reviewing the security footage from our neighborhood cameras. At home, the atmosphere felt heavy. Christmas lights still glowed faintly on the tree, but their warmth had vanished. The air was thick with fear, anger, and a deep, unsettling curiosity about Karen's true intentions. I sat with Ethan on the couch, his small hand gripping mine tightly. He had become our beacon through the chaos, our reminder that courage can come in the quietest forms. But even his bravery could not prepare me for what was about to be uncovered. The detective assigned to the case called me mid-afternoon. "We've uncovered something you need to know," he said, his voice low, cautious. "Karen, she has a history. Not just anger toward your son, but violent tendencies that go far deeper than we initially thought." My stomach dropped. I nodded for him to continue. "She's been involved in multiple incidents over the years," he explained. "There are reports from previous workplaces, neighbors, and family friends. Instances of harassment, threats, and even attempted intimidation. None were serious enough to press criminal charges, but patterns are clear. This isn't the first time she's fixated on someone she perceives as weak." My mind raced. All the little comments, the cold looks, the hostility toward Ethan, it wasn't just spite. It was calculated. "Do you mean," I asked, my voice shaking, "she planned this?" Detective nodded slowly. "It appears deliberate. Her actions, both before and during the dinner, suggest premeditation. She knew Ethan was deaf, she knew he couldn't hear, and she used that to her advantage. The gun, she didn't panic. She intended to threaten, maybe worse." I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. The woman I had seen smile at holiday gatherings, who pretended to be caring, polite, family-oriented, was far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. Later that day, I met with the detective at the station. He handed me files, documents, and reports detailing Karen's past behavior. Incidents where she had intentionally isolated people, spread rumors, and even created fear to control situations. The pattern was unmistakable. Karen thrived on exerting power over those she deemed vulnerable. Ethan sat beside me, quietly observing. He didn't need to hear these details to understand the danger. His small hand rested against mine, and I could feel his silent acknowledgement of what had just been revealed. Detective Thompson, he had been kind throughout the process, leaned forward, lowering his voice. "We've also found something else. Something tied directly to her motive." I braced myself. "What is it?" He paused, flipping through the files. Karen had financial and personal grievances against your family. Property disputes, inheritance issues, and her resentment toward Ethan was fueled not just by prejudice but by envy. She saw him as a symbol of what she couldn't control, a challenge to her authority in the family. My hands trembled. Everything clicked into place, the subtle threats, the casual cruelty, the careful timing of her actions. The Christmas dinner hadn't been a random attack. It had been meticulously planned. Later that evening, as I sat with Ethan in the quiet of our living room, I watched him sign, slowly, deliberately recounting the past few days. His small fingers moved with precision, translating his observations into a narrative I could share with the detectives. Each motion exposed another layer of Karen's intent, another detail of her dangerous obsession. It was eerie. How a child who could not hear could reveal more truth than an entire room of adults. And then came the most shocking revelation. Through investigation, it was discovered that Karen had previously tried to manipulate a family member into taking legal action against us, claims that were baseless, designed purely to isolate Ethan and weaken our family's position. Her actions weren't just emotional attacks, they were legal and strategic. I felt my heart pound. The woman who had smiled across the Christmas table had been scheming behind the scenes for years. Her mask of civility was a lie, and her hatred toward Ethan wasn't just personal, it was intentional, methodical, and dangerous. That night, I sat with Ethan by the flickering glow of the Christmas lights. He leaned against me, exhausted, yet alert. I signed to him carefully. "Do you understand what she tried to do?" He nodded solemnly, small fingers trembling. Then he signed slowly. "She can't hurt us anymore. Truth wins." Tears blurred my vision. He was right. The truth had come out, stronger than her threats, stronger than her gun. But I also knew that this was only the beginning of our fight. Karen's exposure was not the end. There were legal battles ahead, emotional scars to heal, and a constant vigilance to ensure our family remained safe. Yet, in that moment, one thing was certain. The small, silent child who had been targeted with violence had turned into the hero of his own story, and the greatest power in the world had been revealed, the power of truth, resilience, and courage. Karen's lies had crumbled. Her carefully constructed facade had shattered, and in the wreckage we found clarity. The Christmas that had begun in fear and violence had ended with revelation, courage, and the undeniable proof that the innocent, even those who cannot hear, can expose evil in ways no one expects. And as I held Ethan close that night, I knew the world had changed, not just for us, but for him. Because the child who had faced the ultimate threat had survived, revealed the truth, and forced even the most hardened adults to see the real Karen for who she truly was. The battle was not over, but the tide had turned. The courtroom was silent, except for the soft shuffle of papers and the occasional whisper from the gallery. Karen sat at the defendant's table, her hands cuffed, face pale, and drawn. The confident, polished persona she had worn during family gatherings and casual conversations was gone. Now, stripped of all pretense, she appeared smaller somehow, as if the gravity of her actions had physically crushed her. I sat in the front row, holding Ethan's hand. He was calm, his eyes steady. Though he could not speak, his presence radiated a quiet authority that drew the attention of everyone in the courtroom. People glanced at him, realizing that this small child, so fragile in appearance, was the key witness to the events that had terrified a family on Christmas night. The prosecutor began, presenting the case with meticulous detail. They outlined Karen's prior incidents, her obsessive behavior, the threats she had made over the years, and her deliberate targeting of Ethan. The gun, the timing, the statements she had made, all pointed to premeditation. But the most powerful evidence, they explained, came from Ethan himself. I watched as the prosecutor signaled to me. I gently lifted Ethan onto my lap and began translating his signed account of that night to the court. Slowly, deliberately, his tiny fingers moved, recounting how Karen had threatened him, pulled out the gun, and aimed directly at him. Every motion was precise. Every gesture conveyed terror, intent, and truth. The courtroom grew tense. Karen shifted uneasily in her seat. She tried to smile, to claim innocence, but every person watching could see the cracks in her story. Ethan's testimony, silent yet undeniable, left no room for doubt. One of the officers who had responded that night took the stand. He described the scene, the chaos, the broken plates, the toppled Christmas tree, and the terror that had filled the room. He corroborated Ethan's account, reinforcing the evidence that Karen's actions had been deliberate. As the trial progressed, more family members and neighbors came forward. Each statement revealed patterns of intimidation and hostility that Karen had hidden behind a mask of civility. It became clear that this was not an isolated incident. It was part of a history of controlling and aggressive behavior. Karen's defense tried to claim it had been an accident. They argued that Ethan's movements had startled her, that she had panicked. But the combination of witness statements, security footage, and Ethan's precise signing painted a different picture. It was impossible to deny her intent. Throughout the trial, Ethan remained calm. Though small and fragile, he exuded a presence that was almost magnetic. His silent courage shocked the courtroom. Everyone watching realized that this child, who could not hear, who could not speak, was holding the most powerful truth in his hands. The turning point came when the prosecutor asked me to translate one final sign from Ethan. He signed slowly, deliberately. I was not afraid to tell the truth. She cannot hide anymore. The words, though silent, carried a weight that filled the room. Karen's eyes widened. She realized that no matter what she said, no matter how she tried to twist events, the truth had been exposed through the hands of the very child she had targeted. The jury deliberated for only a few hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Karen was found guilty on multiple counts: attempted assault, child endangerment, and premeditated threats with a deadly weapon. I felt a wave of relief, but it was tempered by exhaustion. The ordeal had been long, terrifying, and emotionally draining. But the sight of Ethan, still quiet, still brave, still unwavering, reminded me that justice had been served not only by the law, but by truth itself. After the trial, the family gathered quietly at home. There was no celebration, no laughter, only reflection. The Christmas tree remained broken, a silent testament to the events that had unfolded. But there was also hope, a fragile, luminous hope. I knelt beside Ethan, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "You were incredible," I signed softly. He looked at me, small lips trembling, and signed back, "I only told what I saw." It was simple. It was honest. It was powerful. Over the next few weeks, the aftermath of the trial continued to unfold. Family members reached out, offering support and apologies for past ignorance or complicity. Neighbors checked in, bringing meals and gifts, recognizing the courage of a child who had faced unimaginable fear and had turned it into truth. Karen was sentenced to prison, her life forever changed by the consequences of her actions. Yet, even in the face of justice, the emotional scars lingered. We knew that healing would take time, for Ethan, for me, and for the entire family. But there was a shift, subtle yet profound. Where fear had once existed, there was now respect. Where silence had been a source of vulnerability, it had become a tool of resilience. Ethan, who could not speak, had communicated more truth than anyone in that courtroom could have imagined. And as I watched him play quietly in the corner of the living room, I realized something essential. Courage does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers in small gestures, in determined eyes, in hands that sign the truth louder than any voice could. That Christmas, though marred by violence and fear, had ultimately revealed the most important lesson: that honesty, courage, and resilience cannot be destroyed by hatred. They cannot be silenced. Ethan had faced the unthinkable, survived, and reminded us all that even in the darkest moments, light can prevail. The story of that night, and the trial that followed, would remain with us forever. But it also became a symbol that even the smallest, quietest voice can carry the weight of justice, and that truth, no matter how silent, will always find a way to be heard. The weeks following Karen's conviction were quieter, but not peaceful. The house, once filled with the chaos of Christmas and terror, had regained a fragile calm. Yet there was an unspoken tension, an awareness that even though justice had been served, life had been permanently altered. Ethan had returned to his usual routines. He played. He laughed softly. He signed to me the stories of his day. But beneath the innocence, there was a resilience that was impossible to miss. This child, who had faced one of the most terrifying nights of his young life, carried a presence that demanded attention and respect. Then came the unexpected revelation, a twist no one saw coming. One morning, while going through some old family documents for insurance and legal purposes, I found a file that had been tucked away, nearly forgotten. It was labeled in Karen's handwriting, Plans. My heart sank as I opened it. Inside were notes, lists, and sketches, everything Karen had been planning for years. It was chilling. She had meticulously documented times, events, and potential opportunities to manipulate, intimidate, or even harm Ethan. There were references to past attempts, carefully coded warnings about family members who might intervene, and outlines of what she called her ultimate control plan. It became clear her attack on Christmas night had not been a single act of rage. It was the culmination of years of obsession, hatred, and meticulous planning. I showed the files to the detective. His eyes widened. This confirms premeditation beyond any doubt, he said. This isn't just criminal behavior. It's calculated, intentional, and deeply disturbing. As I looked at Ethan, small hands folded in his lap, I realized something remarkable. He had survived not just because of luck, but because of his awareness, his courage, and his unshakable instinct to face the truth. The next moment of revelation was even more surprising. In her notes, Karen had also documented a backup plan, something she had intended to use if the Christmas attack failed. It involved manipulating neighbors, creating false narratives, and even framing other family members for negligence. Had she succeeded, the fallout could have been catastrophic. I felt a chill run down my spine. The Christmas night that had felt like a single terrifying moment was actually part of a larger, darker pattern. The realization made me shiver, but also strengthened my resolve. Karen's plan had been fully exposed, and the law had prevented the next step. Even more astonishing, Ethan had intuitively acted in the way that would dismantle her schemes. His silent testimony, the signing, the gestures, the careful recreation of events, had not only saved him, but had dismantled years of planning. It was a revelation that stunned the entire family. Family members who had doubted the severity of Karen's behavior now understood just how close we had come to disaster. And in that understanding, there was gratitude, not just for justice, but for the bravery of a child who could not speak or hear in the conventional sense, yet had communicated the most important truth of all. In the weeks that followed, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the lessons remained vivid. I would never forget the night Karen pulled the gun, the moment Ethan's fingers signed a story, or the first time the detective watched in awe as the silent child narrated a crime with unmatched clarity. And yet, perhaps the most important truth of all was this. Courage is not measured by words spoken, but by actions taken, no matter how small. Resilience is not loud. It can exist in silence, in unwavering focus, and in the refusal to let fear dominate. Ethan had faced an unimaginable threat, yet he had transformed terror into power. His quiet bravery had not only saved his life, but had exposed the darkness in a way no one else could. As I reflect on those events, I am reminded that stories like this are not just tales, they are warnings, lessons, and inspirations. They remind us to recognize the hidden dangers, to protect the vulnerable, and to honor courage in all its forms, spoken or unspoken. And now I turn to you, the viewer. If this story has moved you, if it has left your heart racing, if it has made you reflect on courage, resilience, or the power of truth, then take a moment to act. Backhand index pointing right comment below and share your city. Where are you watching the story from? Backhand index pointing right hit that like button to support real stories being told. Backhand index pointing right subscribe to the channel to never miss stories that are emotional, shocking, and life-changing. Stories like Ethan's. that remind us that even in the darkest moments, truth and bravery will prevail. Remember this. No matter the odds, no matter how silent or small someone may seem, the courage to face danger, the bravery to reveal truth, and the resilience to survive can shake the world. Ethan, my silent hero, proved it. And if one child can do it, imagine what the rest of US can achieve when we refuse to be silent in the face of injustice. The Christmas that began with terror ended with revelation, justice, and hope. And the world, through the courage of a small, silent child, was reminded that truth will always find a way to be heard.